All right, welcome to week 7 of 15. So we are a little less than halfway through the course. I hope you're doing well. I apologize. I'm sure you were heartbroken that I didn't get a video on last week. But anyway, my computer was all messed up, so I'm happy to be back. And week 7 is a continuation of week 6 in the sense that we are focusing on utilitarianism. So we'll continue that focus, and we're going to do a little bit more applications. We're going to read an essay by a very famous utilitarian, John Stuart Mill, one of the most famous and important utilitarians. It's a difficult essay. Students tend to have a lot of trouble with the language of it, but it's also a very important essay and also a really great example of how you can respond to an objection. We're also going to be doing some application of utilitarianism, focusing on 2 videos. One is a video about this guy Steve-O from a TV show who became a vegetarian. He's going to talk about why he became a vegetarian. And it's interesting to think about this case in relationship to utilitarianism. The other video we're going to watch is this documentary about this hockey player named Derek Boogaard. And he was a very famous, very good at fighting. And the video takes you through his career, ultimately his downfall. And as a utilitarian, we can ask, was he doing the right thing? Was he producing more happiness in the world? Because that ultimately is what utilitarianism is all about. And just to kind of revisit some of what you said in your posts during the week, I just want to try to address some of those themes, and I want to make sure that you're very clear about what exactly utilitarianism means. In its most basic, simple slogan form, utilitarianism means that we are trying to make the world a happier place. That's the goal. A good utilitarian makes the world happier. A bad utilitarian makes the world less happy. Now, what this means is it can be a little bit tricky. For utilitarian, everyone's happiness counts, and it has the same value. My happiness counts exactly the same as your happiness or unhappiness. My happiness counts just the same as Barack Obama's happiness. It counts just the same as Pope Francis's happiness. As individuals, each of our happinesses are equally valuable, and so too with our unhappiness. Now, what the utilitarians got to do is they got to look at an action or a rule or a behavior, and they're trying to ask themselves, is this action or is this rule or is this behavior going to produce more happiness? And for all those affected by the action or the behavior, the character or the rule. I include myself as part of that equation. So when I think about everyone who's affected by a particular action, rule, or behavior or characteristic, I ask myself, does it produce more happiness than unhappiness? If the result is a less happy world, then I shouldn't do it. If the result is a more happy world, I should. Now, what this can mean is that I could have a duty to do something that makes me really unhappy. Let's take, for example, let's say a great entertainer, someone or a great comedian. And this comedian is excellent. He or she makes people laugh all the time. Everyone loves him or her. That just produces a lot of joy, a lot of good, a lot of happiness. But she or he is miserable being a comedian for the sake of argument. They hate it. They're down. It's all an act. It's all for show. They don't really mean it. Well, for a utilitarian, this person could have a duty to continue to be a comedian because it produces more happiness in the world, even though he or she as a person is very unhappy, very miserable. It's not that their happiness doesn't count. It's just when you think about everyone who's impacted by the comedian's behavior, more people are made happy. There's more happiness produced, even though he or she, in this hypothetical example, is made unhappy. One of your posts gave a great example of how you could be forced to give up your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your family. If in a certain situation, that would produce the most happiness. Let's say your father, he's 80 years old, and his heart could, or he could be used as an experiment in a medical hospital. And this experiment could do a lot of good. It could produce a lot of happiness. It could make a lot of people feel better and cure their ills. Yet he doesn't want to do it, and he's unhappy about it, and your family's miserable about it. Well, utilitarian could say the right thing to do there is, to suffer. And not because your happiness doesn't count, it's just that when you think about everyone impacted by the decision, it's better for all. It's more happiness produced. So this idea that you could be radically unhappy, and it could be your duty, is true for utilitarianism. Somebody else mentioned the idea of incest, and it's very important to notice that for utilitarianism, no value is sacred. It's not like honesty is always wrong. It's not like you should never cheat, you should never kill, you should never steal. In a certain situation, if killing or stealing or cheating would produce more happiness, then that's what you should do. So no value is sacred. It's just about the consequences, and this is really the focus of the theory. We're looking to produce the best possible, maximize the consequences, and that means maximizing happiness. Now, this mostly, I'm just kind of looking at some of the notes here, this mostly means that you're going to do what the majority wants, but that's not always true. There could be a case where maybe a majority of people are made mildly more happy by a certain situation, but there's a minority of people that are made radically unhappy. Let's say slavery. So maybe slavery made 90% of the population at the time happy, cheaper labor, more workforce, blah, 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 blah. But it made 10% of the population, namely the slaves, miserable. In that case, maybe it made life a little bit more convenient and luxurious and pleasurable for the majority, but it could make this 10% really dramatically, completely unhappy. And so their small gain in happiness may be outweighed by the minority's large, significant degree of unhappiness. Okay, so that's really all I want to say about that. As a theory, it is neither egotistic or completely altruistic. It means, and this is a mistake that some people made, and some of you guys made on your posts, utilitarianism doesn't say just go out and do for others and don't care about yourself and just, completely devote yourself to others without thinking about yourself. What utilitarianism says is consider yourself and then do what produces the maximum amount of happiness. So it's not altruistic in the sense of you just giving yourself to others, but it's also not egotistic. It's not saying just focus on yourself. It's saying focus on everybody who's impacted by your behavior. Now, in practice, that may mean that you have to do something that makes you really unhappy. It may mean that you devote most of your life to others. Maybe most of your time is spent doing good for others, things that make them happy. But even with that being said, you still, as an individual, count and matter and have to be part of the equation. All right, so I want to kind of end here with just a few thoughts on the week ahead. So you're going to read this essay by John Stuart Mill. A difficult essay, very hard. The language, to most of you, is going to feel, hard to decipher. But the basic objection that he's going to respond to is this idea that utilitarianism, if you base it on pleasure and pain, and ultimately that means basing it on happiness and unhappiness, it means that you're going to live like an animal, like a slob. You're just going to do what makes you feel good at the moment, because if it's all about being happy or seeking pleasure, then aren't we just going to do pretty much, and aren't humans going to want what we immediately desire, what makes us feel good in the moment? And so if this is the case, then utilitarianism would have us all living like animals, uncivilized. It would take a step back. So that's the objection. This is coming from people that don't like utilitarianism, that disagree with it. And then Mill makes a very kind of fascinating response, and your goal in the discussion post for Mill is to talk about what his response is. The two other discussion posts, one is on the video of the hockey player that I mentioned before, and the other is on a video that explores the idea of vegetarianism and how animals are treated. The last thing I want to mention is the idea of your midterm exam. So I'll be making this up on Monday and Tuesday, and I will post it on Tuesday by noon. I'll email you a notification, but that's going to be your big assignment for the week. In general, people have some people are doing really well with the discussion boards. Some are struggling. Make sure you get back on track if you have fallen off the wagon. All right, and as always, if you want to talk to me, if you have any questions, please feel free to give me a call. Thank you and have a great night.